Here we are in December. The release happened not too long ago on November the 30th. I have to admit, I love this photo with my face in the kitchen. Looks like I'm about to give you some sort of recipes, like I'm some sort of top chef. But you're lucky I'm not cooking for you, which with my cooking is actually just as well. So the only recipes I'll have are for some 3D scenes, so you're safe. And what we're doing is with 11, we focused on enhancing the set of tools that you, our users, have at your disposal so that you can take your work to new heights. So let's begin. We're going to start with the tile map. It's probably the biggest feature. And I know that the title sounds rather dry, tile map. Doesn't sound very exciting, but actually it's much more flexible than you might think, especially because of two or three features that are not necessarily obvious when you hear the words. And I'm going to take you through some finished examples, tell you a bit about it, and then I'll actually show you some UI setups that achieve certain simple effects. And so for tiles, users have long relied on third-party tools to achieve these, which are kind of out of date. Sometimes they don't work anymore. And that means we wanted to give you an integrated solution for creating tiles, bricks, floors, paving stones. It's actually very flexible. So yeah, we've created our own tile map built right into Corona. Comes with the ease of use that you'd expect from a Corona feature and the power and flexibility that you'll need. We have some great examples from Romulus on the forum. He had a lot of fun coming up with a lot of different types of setups. This is one of his. You can use preset tile patterns, or you can create your own through some custom settings. You can use bitmaps or procedurals to define the colors, bump, roughness, and so on for the tiles and the gaps. And of course, you can repeat and randomize those as you need. And part of the what you might call hidden features or not so obvious features, the mapping randomizer and the multi-map, which you're probably familiar with, have new modes, which is basically by tile ID. So each of those will work based on the individual tiles created in the tile map. The tile map, the other hidden feature, the feature that's not necessarily obvious when you hear the name, it lets you create multiple inputs and outputs. And that means you can use one tile map to control the results for color, glossiness, bump, displacement, any channel you like, all from the one tile map. So if you need to adjust the number of tiles or whatever, you're not having to do that in multiple tile maps. You can do it all in one place. So you don't have to keep different ones in sync. Has different modes. With the center mode, you can pixelate an image. Here you can also see you can round the corners of the tiles. And let's say it is called tile map, but it has a lot of uses besides. Here's another example from Romulus, who used it to create these paving slabs, these stones, cobblestones if you like, and also to drive the scatter that controls the grass growing between them. So it's super flexible. And first thing I'll say is if you want to learn it in detail, those tutorial just came out on YouTube end of last week. For Max, the Cinema 4D one will be out very soon. I'd imagine this week, if all goes to plan. It goes into all the detail you could need, much more than I'll go into here. So when you really want to dive in deep and start exploring this feature, pop on over to our YouTube and have a watch of that. But what I'll do is give you some simple examples. So this is what it looks like. This is the default. This is a great way to set up the size of your tiles and the spacing for the gaps and so on. Just leave everything at default. You can see you've got a single tile color, you've got a single gap color, and you can then define the pattern, the tile width and height, gap thickness, gap blur, and so on. So you can set that up to sort of prepare your scene. And this is the basic thing that people might think of when they hear the words tile map, but don't worry, it goes so much further than this. Let's start expanding it. We can pop in a bitmap. Very common that tiles may just be repeated. Could be each tile has a pattern and it's the same pattern on each tile. Easily done, of course. You just replace the solid color with a bitmap. You can use procedurals too, though this is a bit dark. But you'll see with this setup, the procedural is exactly the same on every tile, like our pattern. It's repeating, and that's probably not what we want from a procedural, but that's no problem. We just use a mapping randomizer, and you can see it has the new tile ID mode, which is what I've checked here. And that means we can use all the features of the mapping randomizer, the UV offsets, rotating the UVs, scaling the UVs, and that can all be randomized by each tile. As a note, you don't need to engage the tiling mode in the mapping randomizer. That's actually for pasting a texture across a very large single surface. So you can leave it disabled here and it will work perfectly fine. Now you can take any bitmap, any procedural, and randomize how it appears on each individual tile. Same thing applies with our multi-map. It also has a tile ID mode. I've just used the default multi-map here with the 6 colors. Again, you can use the multi-map just as you would in any other situation. So you can place bitmaps in there, procedural textures in there, have more or less of those. And of course, you can use the hue, saturation, and gamma randomization as well. So the tile ID mode and the mapping randomizer and the Corona multi-map, not necessarily obvious from the fact we added the tile map, but that is there, and that really is what gives the tile map a lot of its functionality that it integrates with these other pre-existing Corona features. Of course, we can go further. We can give the gap some color. We don't need to just leave that as a solid color. I threw in a quick procedural. And we can go further again. This is the feature I like the most. It's called the additional outputs. You can see it, I hope, highlighted in red down at the bottom. I've added one additional output, and what you'll see now is I have my original tile and gap color, but now I have a second set of tile and gap colors. Obviously, it's driven by the same tile width and height and thickness. It's driven by the same tile randomization because you can randomize the tiles, you can tweak the height, the width, the row height, the column width, the offset, rotation, and so on. And because of these multiple in and outputs, you don't need to have multiple tile maps where if you change the tile width in one, you have to change it in 6 different places. And what I've done here, I've just used straight Corona colors and I'm driving the roughness. So you can see I've made the tiles super shiny because they have no roughness. And I have made the gaps not shiny at all. They have 100% roughness. And we can extend that, of course. There's no end to how many additional outputs we can have. Here I've added another set, and this I'm using to drive the displacement. Once again, I'm using solid colors, but these, of course, could be bitmaps, procedurals too. And that means that this is very flexible because from one place, you can control all these different channels and you can make your tiles or bricks or wood vary in any way that you like. Now, I'll have a look at some of the more complex examples we saw earlier. You can see in the background, this is the one with the missing tiles that Romulus created. You can find this on the forum. A much more advanced layout, quite a lot going on, but it does show you the possibilities. We have occasional missing tiles that have their own texture, and then of course we have the actual tiles themselves, and that just shows you that the limit is your imagination, what you want to create with this. And here is the cobblestones with the grass in between. And he has used two here. He's used one to drive the distribution of the scatter and another to drive the texturing. I believe, but I haven't tested, that it would be possible to use the output, add an extra in-out onto the tile map that's just black and white and use that to drive the scatter so that you wouldn't need two tile maps. So hopefully this is beginning to spark your imagination as to just what you can create with this. There's no reason why you can't create wooden planks on the floor. No reason why you can't create tiles, obviously, but also you can create bricks. And I mentioned earlier, and I haven't shown it, but there is a way of defining custom patterns. So you're not limited to the 10 or so presets that we give you. You can create your own. I'm going to pause for a second, by the way, and say I don't see questions in chat just now. What I'm going to do is go through the presentation, and then, as is my usual, at the end I'll stop for Q&A, and I'll go and have a look at your questions. Do feel free to be posting them as we go in the Q&A chat, and I'll get to them at the end. So our next feature, we added altitude controls for scatter. Two things being driven by the altitude here. One is our tree line. You can see the trees only go so far up the mountain, just like in the real world. But also the clouds are being driven by an altitude map as well. And I can take you through, this is a similar example I created so that I could break it down for you. We start with some rocks scattered on the mountain. And what I want is I want these to be down by the lake, but not all the way up the mountain, as if they've fallen down and come to rest at the bottom. And that's easy enough by limiting the altitude height. And now I have rocks at the bottom and nowhere else. And we can add trees. We can see here they go all the way up the mountains. You'll see them perched on top. Now there's a slope limitation, so they don't appear on the steep surfaces. But yeah, I don't really want them climbing all the way up the mountain like that, so that's easily fixed again by giving them some controls in the altitude. I also set a minimum so that they don't quite get down to the water's edge. We'll assume the lake rises and falls, and so right at the water's edge you don't get any trees. So the altitude control is both controlling the lower limit of the trees and the upper limit. And then I plonked some clouds on, scatter them onto the mountains. Clearly not what I wanted because I can't see a thing, but with the altitude controls, I can set a low and high limit for those again. And that way I can have my mountain tops surrounded by clouds, but the rest of them uncovered and visible. And that gives us the end result. Here is a quick look at the controls. The limitation itself is very easy. We have a lower and higher range. But what gives it its the real power is the fall-off curve. Now, the fall-off curve, I'll show you the next page. I've broken it down. So from left to right, we're going from 80 to 1200, which is our range. And then vertically, we're talking how much distribution is present at that point, at that altitude. So you can see that there's some, but not many, trees at the 80-meter and below level. This rises fairly quickly. Then we have maximum distribution up into about 600 meters, I guess, almost halfway. and then that falls off smoothly and gradually up to the maximum height, after which there are no trees because this is all the way down zero distribution. Very easy to control, fall offs at the top range and the bottom range, all from one curve. And as a note, if you wanted to have this zigzag up and down, you can have a banding effect to the distribution. I'm not sure what that would be useful for, but this curve does give you that level of control. And I also want to point out that I'm using here the position independent mode. What that lets me do is basically I'm taking this altitude from the mountain itself. So if I lifted these mountains up, the trees and rocks would actually move with it and they'd stay the same. I could use the world mode, in which case, if I move the mountains up, the trees would slide down the mountain because they're set to this range in the world. And as the mountains were dragged up, the geometry was pulled up. And the height of the mountains got higher, that tree line would get lower and lower on the mountain. In this case, I wanted the flexibility to be able to tweak the mountain height compared to the lake and have my altitude go with it, follow along with the height of the mountains. And that's why I used position independent. So it's also very flexible. And in a similar vein, we have look at for scatter. Here we have an example from our video. We have the fish all looking at the same object. And here's an example. These are my very simple fish. They're not the ones used in the video. They were much better. I just did these as a test. So I have all the objects looking at this cube. It's a dummy object. And you can see if I place it here, then obviously the shoal of fish are all heading towards it. If I put it in the middle, then the shoal of fish all turn towards the center. Each fish is at a different rotation, each one facing the cube. And this also has a fall-off curve, works in the same way as we saw before. So you could have the fish in the center very much focused on a piece of bread that is in the water, and the ones that are further away and maybe haven't noticed it, you could have them stick with the random rotation and not be looking at that object at all. So the fall-off curve adds a lot of flexibility. And then, of course, you have control over the axis as to how the objects are going to rotate. Is that in the X, Y, and Z? Is it reversed? Do they only look in the horizontal, only rotate in the horizontal? That way you can keep people with their feet on the ground if you're doing a crowd of people. And they won't start leaning forward or backward depending on the position or the height of your look at object. So this lets you have much more control over the results of your scatters. And here's my example. This is they're all looking at an object to the top left, and these are my simple test fish. Here they are. If there was no look at, each fish is just randomly going in a direction. And here they are with that center example. And in this case, because I didn't enable horizontal, the fish that are deeper in the water are actually coming up. You can see they're sort of pointing head on towards us, and the ones close to the top are going straight along. Super handy for when you have some sort of 3D setup to your look at. And you can also do creepy things like this. Quite a frightening image. I think that would have been best around Halloween. Also, in every job that we do, there are some things that they're not really complicated. They're just fiddly and time consuming, and they come up time and again. And in 3ds Max, we've introduced a set of handy scripts that we call power tools. These are designed to speed up these kinds of tasks. So, for example, we have a set of chairs here, and let's say we decide, I really don't like those red chairs. I want to replace them. We can use the object replacer and replace those with a totally different chair. Of course, we could select just some and replace just some. So very powerful for when you have things in the scene that you just want to replace. Handy if you want to set things up with placeholder objects and put high poly final objects into the scene later on. And we can also jiggle them around a bit. I like to think of this one as before the meeting. The chairs are all nicely laid out. And then when everybody stands up and goes home, all the chairs get moved slightly, they get rotated slightly. And this is with the randomizer. You can randomize the position and the rotation. It's great for adding a little bit of jiggle to your scene, a little bit of chaos, dare I say. The full list is here. There's the toolbar that we've added. Object replacer we've covered. The transform randomizer we covered. There's also a pivot placer, super handy for instantly setting the pivot to a particular location. We have a scene cleaner. You have a bunch of options as checkboxes, so you can strip out unnecessary animation keys or layers. Sometimes Max leaves a bunch of things lying around, and this will help just strip that out of your scene. And we have a selection randomizer. Basically, I could select all these chairs, and then I could say I want to keep a selection of 60%. Then I delete them to leave me with only 40% of the chairs. So the selection randomizer quite handy as well when you're dealing with lots of objects. For C4D users, we've added direct support for Pyro. And here you can see it being used to generate smoke from our magic lamp, I guess. But it's also being used to create the candle flame in the pilot lamp, the storm lamp. And here it's been used to create the fire in the fire pit. So if you want to be creating fire, smoke, or ink in water, it's all super easy to do. We have some examples from Ben on the team. There's a rocket engine, there's a wind tunnel with smoke. And then here's a close-up of that storm lamp. As I say, the flame is generated using Pyro in C4D. Now, it was possible to generate it in Pyro, save it to a VDB, bring it back in, but now none of that's necessary. You can just create it, tie it to a Corona volume object, and render it directly. Next up, we have the edge map. This is my wanted poster, probably for my bad jokes. And what the edge map does is where you have a 2D object, something with no actual thickness, it detects the geometric edges and then lets you work with a distance range. So here I've used it to discolor the poster at the edges, and I've also used it to add some procedural opacity to eat holes out at the edge and displacement as well. Here's the example from our video, a much nicer one. And it's a much more sensible use case than my wanted poster. But if you want to do, it's basically a similar thing to what ambient occlusion or the round edges maps do. Those only work on enclosed objects, that is, objects that are fully 3D. They don't work on 2D objects like pieces of paper, plant leaves. There's lots of cases where you might have open geometry that doesn't have thickness and you want to tweak what happens just at the edges. So again, it's one of those that has a lot of creativity. Here is the setup used for the map. You can see there are two edge maps in use. One is driving the displacement and one is driving the color. We have the original bitmap being darkened and some noise added. And then the edge map applies that around the edges of the map. And we have a bunch of smaller improvements as ever. We've got some improved normal bump filtering. In an ideal world, when using bump and normal maps, they'd remain unfiltered. But this has a problem in actual use, in that you'll probably end up with pretty heavy flickering in animations, or you could end up with fireflies or noise in stills, which means every render engine does some sort of filtering on those to avoid that. Now, when these have lots of small details, or old filtering could cause the object to lose those details in a smaller resolution image, or as the object got further away. Basically, what would happen is the object would become more and more mirror-like, because the bump and normal details were being smoothed out so much that they basically disappeared. So here we see our cabinet. We can see it's got quite a rough surface. The reflections are quite blurred. And if we move it back on the old filtering, especially here on the top, you can see they're almost razor sharp now. It's almost as if they're not softened at all by the bump normal applied to the object. And with the new filtering, you can see that retains more of the smooth reflections. And I can do a side by side. I've zoomed in here. On the top is the old filtering. You can see the reflections are much sharper because the bump normal maps are being filtered and smoothed out. And on the bottom, it's much better preserved. And we have other things in there too. We've updated the Intel Denoiser. It actually has better results. And now it can run on CPU or GPU if you have a suitable NVIDIA GPU. Hopefully, in future updates, it will be GPU independent and will work with AMD and Intel GPUs. And also that means if you do have a suitable GPU, you can now use it in interactive rendering as an option. You can use the NVIDIA one, or you can use the Intel one. We've added some color management because 3ds Max and Cinema 4D both updated to offer more color management options. And we've done some updates to the lister in C4D. There were some features that were in Max, and those are now in C4D to keep them congruent, keep them in line. And as usual, this is only the bigger features, the more visual features. If you pop on over to our blog post, we list everything, large and small, every bug fix, every code improvement, every feature, no matter how tiny. But this gives you a sort of broad overview of what is in Corona 11. And that brings me to Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I can have a look at chat and see if you have any questions for me. Loving the jokes, Tom. So yeah, maybe I'll get off. Maybe I'll get off of that wanted poster after all. Nobody will come hunting me down. I'm going to scroll back up. Okay, there's all our welcomes. No more search for relevant Mercantile. Correct. That's Mercantile is one of those third-party solutions that people have been using for years. Won't need to use it anymore. Personally, it would never run on my machine. I don't know why. I could not get it to run. Even though it was updated for the latest version of Max. So, I mean, I'm super happy to have the built-in tiles because now I can actually use them. And be honest, this is a picture. I'm not sure which one that was. Probably something from our 3D team. They do a really good job. Problem with Corona 11, the RAM memory fills up completely. It doesn't let me use the program. Any solution? We do have an article on our help desk that goes through possible solutions when you're running out of RAM. I'd also welcome you to either post on the forum or submit a ticket, because then we can give you personal advice on your specific situation. Maybe you'll be able to share the scene with us, Carlos, and we can give you some specific advice on what to do. But the article will help. It's got the guides. It's things like make sure you don't have like a 8K texture on one tiny pebble in your image. It doesn't need to be 8K if it's just a small part of the image, so that you don't fill your memory up with giant textures. But there's lots of other advice in the article too on how you can help manage your RAM. But anyway, we do welcome you getting in touch with us directly. We'll be happy to help specifically with your situation if you don't find anything in the article is useful. Displacement, Jens is saying, yeah, displacement will use a lot of memory. Light selects, if you have an awful lot of light selects, each one requires more memory, especially if you're denoising each one. So, I mean, if you have something like 20 or 30 or 50 light selects, that can be a problem. Can you create custom tiles of different shapes and sizes? Not shapes and sizes, yes, but they'll always be, let's say, rectangular. You can't have like a hexagonal tile at the minute, not in this version. Let's go through. We got some more discussion on the RAM situation. Oh, Alessandro's had to go away. Thank you for coming along. Does the randomizer work with elements? Select random whole elements and not per polygon, like mass randomizer script inside edit poly. I'm not 100% sure. Apologies, Sergey. Can you post that one over in the forums? The randomizer selection randomizer is intended to work with whole objects rather than polygons or sub-object parts. And so he also asks, Acer's workflow not working with Corona VFB. Depends what you mean. Color management is quite tricky. There are some aspects that are now supported and some that are not. We always also encourage users to really, really understand color management before they start trying to use it, because it's a complicated topic and it's not one that we would like to try and do tutorials on because it's not specific to Corona. But yeah, my advice is give it a go with the new settings and let us know what you're able to do and what you can't do. We welcome feedback on the forums where you tell us, well, now it does this. I'd love it if in the future you could, and let us know what you'd like to see supported. Surely not relevant, says Claudio. I'm still hoping for a Corona GPU. No, there will not be a Corona GPU. Rewriting into GPU is a massive undertaking, and GPU always has certain limitations, and we aim for Corona to be the ultimate in physical realism without any limitations. But something we are looking into for 12 is greater compatibility with chaos tools, and this would include things like Vantage. So there's no promises. We have to have a look into what can be done. But our hope is you'd be able to take a Corona scene into Vantage, and therefore, you have GPU rendering. And with things like improved conversion, again, V-Ray GPU might be an option. And this is how we see Corona offering you a chance to have some sort of GPU solution if you want it. When you're wanting faster render times and you're willing to sacrifice the ultimate in quality that comes from a CPU renderer, it will at least give you a choice. So keep your eyes open throughout the development of 12, and we'll see how all that goes. Will we get some Cosmos presets for the new tile map feature? That's an interesting idea. Not sure at the minute because it's Corona specific, at least for now. But I could certainly see how that would be very useful, Amit. It's a good suggestion, and I have made a mental note. See if maybe we can give some presets in there. You're going to enable flipping and rotating maps. It should be possible already. I'll have to look into it. I'm just thinking there's like the randomized rotation, and all you'd need to do is set minus 360, minus 180 as the top and bottom, and then you're basically rotating the map. You should be able to scale it by -1 to -1, in which case you've flipped the map. So I think that's possible, but I haven't tried it. So I don't want to say for sure it is, but that's my thoughts on how you might achieve that. GPU question again from Yad. As I say, keep an eye out for things like Vantage compatibility. Thomas, chance to choose which map of the material to view in the viewport. You can post that on the forums as a feature request. In part, of course, we are tied to what the DCC offers us. That's Max or C4D, as to just how far we can go with what shows up in the viewport. You're welcome to post if there's a specific thing that you'd love to see displayed in the viewport that doesn't currently work. Sometimes there may be some specifics that are possible, but to generally say you could pick anything in any map and have that shown in the viewport, that's a bigger challenge. I meant on actually live working. I don't like to do that because I'm on a 4K screen. And what we get told is for the people who are not on 4K screens, the text is unreadable. And this is why I prefer to use slides. There's also questions of streaming quality. In terms of the practical and live working, that's our YouTube channel. That's our tutorial videos and feature videos, where we walk you through those, and we can make sure that they're clearly visible and that there's no streaming problems that may make it too blurry or jumpy to be handy. So for the webinars, it'll probably remain something like slides, but don't worry, we'll have you covered in our tutorials. Yes, just not so comfortable as in broken maps, says Jens, about flipping the maps, where you just have to tick a flip. Again, that sounds like a useful feature if you have the time. Sure, appreciate popping onto the forums and giving us that feedback, and we can add that to our ever-growing list of things that we'd like to work on in the future. That's just so it doesn't get lost. Posting on the forums is just super handy because it lets us get it into the system, track the requests, and then reply whenever we have either more questions or a possible working solution. I don't know, sorry, on the BFB result after conversion from ASUS CG to sRGB, but Xavier XR as ASUS CG. If you can ask that question in the forums, we'll definitely be able to get you an answer. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you exactly what is possible right now with 11. Vantage, says Jean-Marc. I agree. Yes, I'm really hoping it works and that we can get it going. It won't be a live bridge, but it will be the option to send over to Vantage and get it rendering similar. What about compatibility with V-Ray Fur and V-Ray Infinite Plane? Nothing planned at the moment. They're not requested that often, but you can post on the forums, and then that way other users can +1. They can do a little vote to say they'd like to see it too. The rectangular tiles, those are common layouts like chevron or herringbone. Some of those, yes. But some of those, no. You wouldn't, I don't think, be able to do chevron. Um, again, haven't tried. Because I don't think you'd be able to get the rotation of the tiles. Um, we would like to look into expanding the customization of the tiles in the future. This depends on what people tell us over the next few months using the existing version. We do welcome your feedback so we can know, what kind of things you'd like to see that aren't in there already. Yeah, Haven the Floor was slow and painful. Painful is my favorite word. If you try and use Max as Haven for, yes. Um, Scatter is better in many cases. And pattern sometimes, depending. Hey, Theodore. And the RAM problem, it all depends, Carlos. It's possible to populate any scene to exhaust any amount of RAM. You can have 128 RAM and you could fill it up quite easily by using 8K textures and everything. 20 different light selects, all of which are denoised and so on. But you shouldn't have any problem with regular everyday scenes. It's always an issue though. The faster computers get and the bigger the amount of RAM we have available, our scenes just grow in complexity to fill it up. We start adding more and more detail that we would never have considered before. Uh-oh, the live webinar starts in 15 minutes. Hope there will be a recording. Well, I have good news for you. Yes, it will be recorded. You'll have to give us a day or two, maybe till the end of the week or start of next week, to get everything nicely edited. But we will be placing this up on YouTube once it's ready. So for anybody that missed it, they'll be able to catch it there. Please share in the Chaos Campus. Keep the jokes in the recording. Do you don't think it'll scare people away? Okay, we'll make sure we keep them in. And I don't think, let's have a look at the Q&A. Let's see, there might be something here. Additional output, what was the purpose with this? Yes, hopefully, yeah, okay. Forget the question. I was going to say, hopefully the talk through in the demo gave you an idea of how that works. Basically, it just saves you duplicating the tile map each time because now you want a bump map, now you want a displacement map. You should be able to do all that with just adding an extra input output, a pair of inputs, basically tile and gap, and then a single output for those. And you can drive whatever you want. Sheen, if you wanted to be crazy. I don't know who has furry tiles. I don't know. Sounds like a '60s thing to me. Cosmos presets, yes, not sure, but it is a great idea. Shipped and I think these are mostly repeats of what we had in the main chat. Yes, so there is a new Intel Denoiser. Oliver asks, you heard there was a new Intel GPU Denoiser. Is it possible to use with an integrated GPU? Probably only if it's probably not, I would say. Right now, the way we have it, it only works with compatible NVIDIA GPUs, which I think are the same restrictions for using the NVIDIA denoiser. However, the Intel GPU is capable of working with AMD and Intel GPUs, something that we want to add in the future. So hopefully in the future update, you'll find that it should work with integrated GPUs like the Intel Arc ones. I've got one of those on my laptop. When Blender, unfortunately, never. We're still staying only with the two DCCs we currently support, Max and C4D. It would just dilute our development too much. We're not a huge team, and there are only the Max and C4D teams. If we were to try and adapt Corona for any other product, it would simply mean, everything else comes to a standstill for a year and a half, 2 years, and we're not willing to do that. So unfortunately, there will not be Corona for Blender. The GPU rendering we answered, flipping, rotating, practical webinar. Okay, good, good, good. Back to the main chat. Claudio's just saying, instead of seeing me over in Prague during this training, you can see me live here. I love these chats, by the way. It's probably my favorite thing. Obviously meeting in person is best of all. I just love to meet our users. I love these presentations too, because I feel it's a chance to talk with you all. And there's nothing better, to be quite honest. We don't make software in isolation. We make it to be used by you, and that's why we love to talk to you. When will the 4K cache move from experimental? Haha, we don't know. Right now, there are still certain situations. So basically, my suggestion with the 4K cache is enable it. And if you don't see any problems, you're fine to keep using it. It should be faster and have less flicker than the UHD. But there are some situations where it does the opposite. So you'll actually get more flickering, or it might be slower. These don't happen very often, but because they happen, we still have it labeled as experimental. It's basically because anything that we say is a default in Corona, we want you to be able to use it and know that you won't have any problems. And right now, the 4K is you can use it and you probably won't have any problems, but that's not good enough to come out of experimental. I can't tell you when that will change. It depends on when and even if these issues can be fixed. It may turn out there is no solution in the 4K cache, in which case we'll either return to improving the UHD cache or maybe look for some other solution. So we don't know at the moment. We're aware of certain problems in certain situations where it doesn't do what it should do, and that's why we keep the experimental tag on it. Hope that answers your question, Sergey. And that's bye from Claudio. Thank you for coming along. When am I next visiting Germany? I don't know. Great thing is we have offices there now. So I'm sure it will happen at some point. It could well be next year. Personally, I've never been to Germany at all so far, and it would be very exciting to visit the country and visit our offices and meet any of our users over there. We've run out of questions, but I'll give you a few more minutes. I will also remind you that once the webinar's done and you have that moment of, oh, I know what I wanted to ask, I remember now. We're always here. Post on the forums, send us in a ticket. We're always happy to answer a question, help you with a problem, hear your suggestions on what you'd like to see. So Jen says a question. Excellent. So yeah, if you find you forgot to ask something or tell us something, no worries. We're always listening, and we always like to hear from you. So yeah, don't feel you've missed your chance. I'll wait for Jen's question. That's great. Is it possible to put the Skyfog Corona guy into a separate light select? Not at the moment, and I would say there's nothing planned for 12 in terms of improving the aerial perspective type fog, but revisiting and considering how it works and in quite a fundamental way is we do have that on our list. Um, could be we'll make some small tweaks to it. Could be we'll make some major changes. And part of that might be, might enable placing it into its own light select. Because I mean, at the moment it's a quick and easy effect, but because it's quick and easy, it's not so flexible, shall we say. So yeah, we do have that down on our list of things to look at, but I can't promise you a deadline or time frame. Guardrays with clouds, it's already possible. Any Corona volumetric material or global volume material, you can get guardway effects. We've got some old YouTube tutorials, but they still apply. I mean, the other thing I will say is they can be relatively slow. They certainly slow down the scene dramatically compared to not using them. Um, Something else we'd like to have a look at in the future. But yeah, you can certainly do that at the moment. Grab yourself a Corona volume material. You can then either apply that to some geometry. If you can set up a cube and that can be the volume something shines through, or you can do it in the global volume material slot for the scene, and also that should work with OpenVDB. Oh, look at that. Straight on with the actual YouTube tutorial. That's brilliant. It's in the chat. The YouTube tutorial link is now in the chat. I personally have always loved volumetric lighting effects. So it'd be fun to revisit them and see if they can be improved, but in terms of either quality or speed or both. But yeah, definitely is possible today. We have about 5 more minutes. If there's no other questions, we can wrap up early, but I'll give you a couple of seconds just to see if there's any last minute thing you can think of. And I'll grab myself a cup of coffee, drinking my coffee. Andre, yes, it will be on YouTube. Probably by the end of the week. I don't want to promise something for the team that has to do the editing and the preparation, but yes, it'll definitely be out. Any hot fixes anticipated? Yes, we have some minor issues in Macs. We are considering releasing the first Corona 12 daily build this week, which will actually be the test for those fixes. And if everything goes smoothly early next year, that'll turn up. Those fixes will turn up as a 11 hotfix one. But it's pretty small stuff, though. It's not deal breaking. If you want to give 11 a go, it's working fine by and large. Beyond that, I don't know as to whether we'll see any further hot fixes or not. Andre, I'm afraid I'm not really the person to ask about color managed workflows. We are putting together some documentation that should help explain what can and can't be done with 11, and obviously those consideration being given to how that can be expanded for 12 and later. Certainly welcome everybody to pop onto the forums, ask your questions. And also give us guidance on, I was trying to do this and I couldn't get it to work, so that we're aware of what everybody would like to see in there. So I didn't really cover anything other than to say that we now have some extent of support for color managed workflows. Emmett has a crash picking a multi-met material from the scene to the material editor. I don't know if that's a Max or Corona issue. Could you send us a ticket? When you get there's a page on our help documentation that tells you how to grab a mini dump, which tells us exactly where it crashed and what it was doing and what the error was. So if you can follow that, it'll tell you how to find the mini dump. If you send it to us with a description of what you are doing, and possibly a scene, then we can investigate. That's one of those, only happens sometimes. Those are the worst. But if it happens and you have the time and you can grab a mini dump after one of those crashes and send it in via ticket, we will certainly take a look. Yeah, I hate the random ones. They're the most challenging. We always love the ones where, like, a user reports it, we test it, and we can duplicate it because then it's easy to investigate. Those ones that just happen sometimes, those are what keeps life interesting. Excellent. Well, we're running out of time, so I do want to say before we go, thank you everyone for coming along. Thank you for taking part and asking your questions. It'd be much more boring without them. Also, I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, whatever you celebrate at this time of year. I hope you have a fantastic time. And here is now play the guitar for us. And here's to a great 2024 for us all. We've got some great things in store at Chaos. It should be one of the most exciting years ever. And we look forward to you coming along with us on that journey.